Hi everyone, it's Elise from the Painted Brushing Co. I am back with this cute little Harry Potter chest that I'm working on, and this time I'm going to be adding some rust to it. So this has been painted with 2 coats of L'essentiel Botanics liquid carbon, and that's the chalk style paint. I have done this raised stenciling, which there is a video of as well. Internally has been painted with a custom mix of L'essentiel Botanics Scarlet and liquid carbon, just to dirty it up a little bit. And now I'm going to add some rust. So I was looking at it and I'm loving where it is at the moment, but it really just needed another element. I'm going to add some rust to these 2 parts. This is actually a leather belt that I chopped up and added to the box for some extra detail. So I'm going to add my rust to there. I'm going to start with that. I may end up adding it in other areas, but I know for sure that I definitely want it in those 2 positions. So to add some rust, I'm going to be using L'essentiel Botanics Rusted system. The Rusted system is a 2-part system. It has a paint which comes in a black, a red and a blue, and that has an activator which is a clear. Now, the Rusted system works by having metal particles in your paint, and then once your paint's almost dry, you come back and you add your Rusted activator, and then you spray it with some water. It's that simple, and I'm going to show you how. The Rusted system, of course, like all of L'essentiel's products, are eco-friendly. They are Aussie made and owned, and they are safe. Now, you are working with real rust and you are working with real metal particles, so it is important to keep that in mind. It is also really important that before you start, you sit your bottle upside down for a little while. Mine's been upside down for about 10-15 minutes. You want to make sure that those metal particles are mixed throughout your paint. Because they are heavier than the paint itself, they will settle to the bottle over time. So make sure you give it a good shake and get those particles all move throughout the paint really well. So we're going to start with this. I have painted liquid carbon first. Whenever I use the rusted paint, I always paint a similar color underneath first. So if I'm using the blue, then I would paint Botanics Navy. If I was using the red, then I would paint Scarlet or even Mailbox Red. So all that does is it reduces the number of coats of the actual paint that you need, of the rusted paint. It reduces the number of coats that you need to get the full coverage. The only reason I wouldn't paint a similar color first is because I'm not after full coverage and I want some of that original finish sneaking through, or peeking through I should say. So give your bottle a really, really good shake. It's been sitting upside down. You want to get those metal particles moving around and you want to get them really really mixed through your paint well. Okay, so I've been shaking for about 5 minutes. My paint's now mixed through. Grab yourself an old plate or container of some sort and pour a little bit of paint out. Now, you are using paint that has real metal particles in it, which means that you do not want to use one of your good paint brushes. You will not always be able to get all of the metal particles out of your paintbrush. And because you won't be able to get them all out, it means that sometimes you're going to have them still stuck in your bristles, and then you're going to end up with your good brush rusting. So always make sure that you use an old brush. I've just got a little really cheapy brush. This is what I always use. Another note is the activator has been known to eat brushes. So do not use it with your Klingons. Do not use it with your Stahlmeisters. Do not use it with your L'essentiel brushes because it will most likely eat them. So just really, really important notes to remember. Now, my paint's out. It's nice and gritty. It is a very thick sort of texture, or consistency I should say, and that's what you want. Now, when I do my rust, I like to have lots of texture in it, so I'll sort of cross-hatch and that sort of thing. So, where's this water coming from? Okay, so the water that I've just put on there is actually water off my bench. It's not the paint. I haven't put any paint on there at all yet, so ignore that. So, paint on my brush. And then it's as simple as brushing it on anywhere that you want it. Now, the only areas that will rust are where you put your activator on. Sometimes it will start to rust without your activator, but that's very rare. You need your activator. So if you get your paint in somewhere where it's not really meant to be, it's not a huge deal. So I am being a little bit cautious. I do only want it on this piece. I kind of want it to look like really rusty metal straps that they used to have around old chests. So I just want a bit more dimension, so that's why I've decided to add the rust. So I'm just getting up there in those edges as well. You don't want to have a rusty top but not have those edges, because naturally they would also be a rusty. Now, you can see, I'll zoom the photo in. You can see that texture there. You can pounce your brush, you can do whatever you want to get that texture. This is a thick paint, so you will naturally get texture, which is a great bonus. So as you can see, because I'm going over the liquid carbon, as I explained before, this is an easy way to get really quick and easy coverage without wasting and using excess product. You only need one coat of rusted. There's no reason to use more than one unless you don't have that base coat already applied. So liquid carbon, you could use any of the greys, the charcoal or the ash. You could also use the milk paint under it. I don't see why you can't do that as well. Or ultimate finish mineral paint. It doesn't matter what you use, as long as you have some form of base coat underneath. Just keep in mind that you will be getting this wet, and I'll show you in a minute. I'll be using a piece of cardboard to try and keep most of my water off the rest of the box. I don't want all of my box to have water on it, but it will be getting wet as well, so keep that in mind as well. I think this is the first time when I've really tried to keep the rust in one particular area. The paint's a good consistency, it's not runny, so I'm finding it quite easy to do so. So that's the top two pieces. Just gonna hold it closed. This is the lid, so it will just pop open if I give it a chance. So I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't just pop open. You don't have to be particularly finicky with this paint. It's very, very easy to use. There's no real skill required to use it. Just follow the instructions. Now, it is important if you're working like on a kitchen bench like I am, put some sort of cardboard or paper underneath. You don't want to get the rusted paint on your bench. It will come off, it is water based, but just keep that in mind. So the rusted comes in 250ml bottles, and then it also comes in sample packs. The sample packs are a set of 3. It's a trio. They are 50ml each in the bottles. And it is a black rusted, a activator, and then a flat sealer as well. It's important to keep in mind that you are using real rust, so you may want to seal. You don't have to seal, but particularly if it's an indoor piece like this is, sealing is quite important. And if you're out, if it's going outside like on a piece of concrete, you'll want to seal, because every time it gets wet or gets moisture on it, it's going to leave rust marks on your concrete, which nobody wants. Alright, so now I'm going to let this dry. It won't take overly long, and it doesn't need to be 100% dry to pop on your activator. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I will come back and do the activator. Okay, so step 1 is pretty much dry. There's a few wet patches, but that's not an issue. So now we're going to apply our step 2. Now our step 2 is the activator. The activator is what activates the metal in the base paint, in the step 1 paint, and this is where our rust will start to form shortly. So I've poured a little bit of the activator out. As you can see, it is clear. And all you're going to do is you're just going to brush this on. Now, anywhere that you brush this is where it's going to rust if you've got your metal particles on. So, say if I brushed over this center bit here, nothing would happen. So, very, very easy. All I'm going to do, I'm going to start brushing that on. You don't need a super thick coat. It doesn't need to be overly thick. You just want it on there enough that it's covering that paint. So just like that. Again, I'm using my brush from before. I have given it a wash. Never ever dip your brush that has had the rusted on it, the rusted step 1 on it, into your activator, because then you're just going to end up with all sorts of issues. Same goes for vice versa as well. So always, always decant these products. Okay, so our step 2 is now almost dry. When I'm touching it, barely anything's coming off on my fingers. It needs to be touch dry. So there's a little bit of moisture, but not much. So all you need to do now is you need to grab yourself a spray bottle with some water. You can use salted water if you like. It will speed up the process a little bit, but I find just regular old water is fine. So a spray bottle with some water. Now, I don't want to get mainly this part too wet. It's not a huge deal. I'm going to get a few watermarks on the rest of my paint. It's not a huge deal. I can fix it. But I am going to use a bit of cardboard just to try and prevent most of that. So, very, very simply, I'm just going to bend my cardboard a little bit around my box, like so. So you could get all fancy here, but that's plenty. And then make sure your spray bottle is spraying properly. Now, you want it fairly wet. You don't want to let it go dry. So it's important to continue coming back and spraying it as needed as well. So again, on this side. And this is where having a piece of cardboard or paper underneath is really important, because it's just going to prevent there we go. So I'm going to let that sit, and then I'll come back and I'll keep putting it on. You want to keep it fairly moist. The rust will start developing straight away. So we should start seeing rust fairly shortly. Definitely, I think, before I come back and spray again. This is one of those products that is very unpredictable. It will always work as long as you have your components right. So as long as you have your step 1 and your step 2, you've applied them correctly, the same way that I've showed you here, and making sure that you have really, really well shaken your step 1 and made sure those metal particles are distributed within the paint. The rusted will work, but how it works and where it forms is very unpredictable. If you find that you are having zero rust and it's just not rusting at all, the first step is to look at your paint. The chances are that your metal particles haven't been mixed through your paint properly. So that's the first area that you need to look at. You then need to be looking at your activator and whether or not you've applied it in the right spots, if you've applied it fairly evenly, etc. as well. And then making sure that you keep it nice and wet. As I said, you can use salt water as well.